Welcome to Taub Live, and happy Boxing Day to all who celebrate or even know what it is, because I don't really. If my friends from England here can explain it to me, go at it in the chat. Folks, I know that we are about to enter the year of 2025, but it sure as heck feels like we are back 200 years ago into the 19th century, or maybe for some of us, not as many years, maybe decades ago, from high school American history class. That's the only way that I can describe the craziness that is now going on with Donald Trump. And what I refer to this as is MAGAfest Destiny. What do I mean by MAGAfest Destiny? I'm referring to, of course, the doctrine of manifest destiny, something from the mid to late 19th century, absolutely true, before the Lincoln era. And I'm pointing to this map for you because let's start with what Donald Trump is trying to do. It's not the Monroe Doctrine. It is the Moron Doctrine. Okay, we will go through why he is desperate and delusional and why actually he might get away with it if he has a willing military and an acquiescent Congress. Let's go. You can see what I am pointing to is a map of the upper half of the Western hemisphere of the globe. And yes, the globe is spherical. It's not flat, but bear with me. This is how we look at maps. You can see in the north, we're up to the Arctic Ocean. We don't quite get up to the North Pole. And down in the south of my map, where you see that little red circle, that is a circle around where the Panama Canal is located, right there in Panama. And then you can see it circling a bit around South America. Now, above the giant circle that you can't miss because I have a yellow arrow pointing to it, guys, that giant circle is a circle around all of Canada. And when you look at these things together, all of Canada plus to the northeast, Greenland. Now, when you look at this all together, you can see that Donald Trump is like a little boy looking at a map and saying, sticking his fat short finger into the map and saying, I want that. I want that. Why does he want that? Let's start with the bottom of the map. He wants control of the Panama Canal because it will help him and his wealthy donors be able to, one, ship their products from across the globe more cheaply, first of all. And also, when you control the turnstile, then you can charge others money. Now, we don't have a legal right to take the Panama Canal. So there's just that fact, right? This is a law show, but it's also a money show, and it's all about the money. Now, let's look to the north. You know that he has already joked and mocked Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in Canada. That's that green territory there on the map, saying it should become the 51st state. And just yesterday saying, you know what, Canada, as if it's a kind of a hostile taker tender offer where actually the Canadians could somehow vote to be taken over by the U.S. He says he's trying to appeal to the average Canadian, saying you would pay 60% less in taxes, he claims, if you would just join the United States. Now, first of all, that's not how that works. But let's just look at this on the merits. Why would Canada want to be the 51st state, right? Why would that even make sense? One state only gets 2 senators, right? It's giant. It's bigger than the space that California is in, and of course, more populous than your average state. So this does not make a heck of a lot of sense as being one state. At the very least, each of the provinces should be their own state, but I'm not suggesting that we even do this. And then above Canada to the northeast, that little blue circle or shape, that island is Greenland. Now, Donald Trump, of course, wants Greenland, he claims, for national security purposes, but we also know he has said that it's rich in minerals and minerals mean money. This is basic. This is very basic. Little kid looking at a map, doesn't see people that matter, doesn't see us as voters, doesn't see Congress as having the legal authority to wage war, because you don't just take land and that is sovereign, that a part of a sovereign nation. You don't, and I say do that, unless you're someone like Vladimir Putin, or you're someone like the United States has been historically, but not recently. So let's, first of all, before we talk about that and why this is this stupid version of the Monroe Doctrine, the Moron Doctrine, and why this is MAGAfest Destiny and not Manifest Destiny, I want to share with you the thinking around just looking at Greenland and Panama and saying we would like them. Okay, here we go. Let me just play this from Fox News.
About to get to the bottom of that. Why is he interested in Greenland?
Well, I think from a national security perspective, as he said, certainly a place that is very rich in minerals and, is geopolitically important for him. And it's a conversation that we want to have with Denmark about being able to use the resources up there.
Yeah, it's going to cost about $1.5 trillion, but it probably will pay off. Next.
$1.5 trillion. He is so confident that no one in the press or his voters will notice that he wants to spend $1.6 million. Where's that money going to come from? $1.6 trillion. And we can't even afford cancer research for children. He promised to bring down the price of eggs, not to invade Greenland and take it over, or instead to force Denmark to give up Greenland for $1.6 million. And by the way, did you know that even though Greenland is part of sort of the Denmark kingdom, Greenland is autonomous in terms of home rule. Greenland has its own internal leadership and looks to Denmark for its, protection. So if you actually want to know about Denmark and Greenland, and probably we're going to be hearing a lot more about this place, is that Greenland is considered to be an autonomous territory, right? It's an autonomous territory, kind of like Puerto Rico is in theory, right? And it's part of the Kingdom of Denmark. Denmark, you might be most familiar with Copenhagen, which is the most populous part of Denmark, but the smallest territory, which is located in Europe, right? But Denmark has Greenland and also has this place called the Faroe Islands, right? These are the territories. And anyone who lives in Greenland, the citizens of Greenland and the Faroe Islands are also considered to be Danish. Now, I don't know how much you want to dive into the history of Greenland, but to suffice it to say that Greenland has been either a colonial subject or more recently an autonomous territory of Denmark's since before the founding of the United States. That's since 1721, Donald. And before that, it goes back to, I think it was 1263, 1,000 years ago, when Denmark was subject to Norwegian colonial rule. The idea that, last term he was joking around about wanting to get Greenland. Well, his jokes are not jokes. They're his wish fulfillment. It is what he wants. Now, of course, I get that you might think, and I've heard people say, oh, this is a distraction. Don't pay attention. You know what? I do pay attention to things that could be violations of law and are sort of anachronistic. And let's just say this. Last time I looked, I still believed that you needed congressional approval to wage war. And that is still something I thought, that a president cannot just start a war without Congress, right? You know about that. But of course, there have been many exceptions to this. It starts with the U.S. Constitution and builds out from the Constitution to something known as the War Powers Resolution. So the Declare War Clause in the Constitution is supposed to make Congress the primary power to initiate military action. And I don't really want to go through the laws with you because I think you know damn well that it doesn't matter what the law says. It matters what the consequences will be. So even if Donald Trump can't get congressional approval, and even if he can't pull a Bush doctrine thing like manufacturing a story to suggest that this is a preemptive strike and he had to use his emergency powers, none of those justifications matter, even though he has enough lawyers around him who will gin them up. And much more important than lawyers is power. As I've said, power will eat law for breakfast every day of the week. And more important than law, of course, is spinning the media, including social media and including the regular legacy media and press. So the bottom line is, if Donald Trump can get his military to be enough of a threat, he could force Denmark into that position, right? It's gunboat diplomacy. I think Europe would be pretty flippin' pissed off, but I don't know. And so we shall see. I honestly hope that he falls flat on his face, but he is serious about this. So I'm going to share with you a recent tweet. This is from the 23rd, the day before Christmas, about Greenland. Okay, let me put this bigger, make this bigger. This is where Donald says, I am pleased to announce Ken Howry as my choice for United States ambassador to the Kingdom of Denmark. Ken is a world-renowned entrepreneur, investor, and public servant who served our nation brilliantly during my first term as U.S. ambassador to Sweden, where he led efforts to increase defense, security, and economic cooperation between our countries. As a co-founder of PayPal, ding, 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 friend of Peter Thiel, also a co-founder. Okay, that ding, 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 I added. Ken turned American innovation and tech leadership into global success stories, and that experience will be invaluable representing us abroad. I don't think Donald wrote this. Now, here we go. For purposes of national security and freedom throughout the world, the United States of America feels. I always chastise my student when they begin a sentence with feels as opposed to thinks or believes. Also, I didn't know that the United States feels anything. You mean I. He means I, Donald Trump. But anyhow, the United States of America feels that the ownership and control of Greenland, ownership and control of Greenland is an absolute necessity. Ken will do a wonderful job in representing the interests of the United States. Thank you, Ken, and congratulations. Okay, he's not joking. So we'll keep our eyes on that. Now, Donald is utterly desperate to do these things because he wants to be like Vladimir Putin, who will just invade territory and take it. This is what he wants to do next. He wants to be a real strongman. He doesn't care if he shoots someone on Fifth Avenue. He knows, as he says, that he wouldn't lose a vote. He also knows, thanks to the United States Supreme Court, that at least in the United States, he is, that in terms of the criminal justice system, it's hands off in terms of anything he does in the core of his Article 2 powers. And that certainly is commanding the military. So there will be no consequences for him, I doubt, other than his failure in effectuating his plan to take over Greenland. Now, let's talk about his deranged Christmas message. And then I promise we will get a break from this to another topic. I'm sure you may have seen this. This is a two-part tweet, but here we go. This is his Merry Christmas message, quite different than what I shared with you yesterday about the message of unity and love and possibility and hope and joy that Joe Biden shared, right? This is Donald Trump's message. Merry Christmas to all including to the wonderful soldiers of China, who are lovingly but illegally operating the Panama Canal, by the way, not true, where we lost 38,000 people in its building 110 years ago. Always making certain that the United States puts its billions of dollars in quote unquote repair money, but will have absolutely nothing to say about quote unquote anything. Also to Governor Justin Trudeau of Canada, whose citizens' taxes are far too high, but if Canada was to become our 51st state, their taxes would be cut by more than 60%. Their businesses would be immediately double in size. Funny, that would happen. This is my side note. I thought the minute he got elected, the war in Gaza would end. I guess that didn't happen. Anyway, immediately their taxes would be cut by more than 60%. Their businesses would double in size, and they would be militarily protected. This is the shakedown part. They would be militarily protected like no other country anywhere in the world. Okay, cool. Likewise, my friends, to the people of Greenland, which is needed by the United States for national security purposes, who want the U.S. to be there as well. Oh, really? I hadn't noticed. In fact, I'd never heard that. Okay, so the people of Greenland who want the United States to be there as well, and we will Merry Christmas to the radical left lunatics who are constantly trying to obstruct our court system and our elections and are always going after the great citizens and patriots of the United States, but in particular, their political opponent, ME. ME, guys, stands for Mark Elias. They know that their only chance of survival is getting pardons from a man who has absolutely no idea what he is doing. He's referring to Biden. Also, to the 37 most violent criminals, anyway, this is the people that he pardoned, not pardoned from death row, they'll still be in prison for life. He refers to that. And then he says, I refuse to wish a Merry Christmas to those lucky souls, but instead will say, go to hell. We had the greatest election in the history of our country. A bright light is now shining over the USA, and in 26 days, we will make America great again. Merry Christmas. Okay. What would Jesus do? I don't know, but I am reminded with this insanity of a wonderful poem by Fairlyn Getty in this book called Coney Island of the Mind. And it is, hold on, it's called If Christ Climbed Down. It's one of my favorite poems. And I think, I don't think I can get him. I wonder if I have it right here. I was going to, I think I can get it right here. Yes, I can. I can play it for you if you just let me share it. I think it's lovely. And let's see. Tell me if you can hear this in a moment. Here we go. Anyway, you get the idea. I love Fairlyn Getty's poem. I have dropped the link in the chat for you to listen to the rest of his poem later. I think it is a diatribe against commercialism and a sort of prayer for peace and justice and for the themes that in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus expressed standing for. And yes, I am a nice Jewish girl, but one of my favorite things that I have ever read is the Sermon on the Mount. And I shall remind you that some of the doctrines of the New Testament refer to things like that a rich man is as likely to get into heaven as a camel is to get through the eye of a needle. And there are a lot of people who twist themselves into pretzels by saying, well, what if it's a really, really big needle and a little teeny tiny camel? And okay, I'm sure that's what was meant. Okay. Now, speaking of Christmas, one more Christmas thing. One of my other favorite things about Christmas is when Elena Kagan was at her confirmation hearing. for the U.S. Supreme Court. And she was asked by one of the senators, I don't want to give it too much away, where she would be on Christmas. And I'm going to play this for you now. Here we go.
I suppose I should ask exactly what you mean by that. I'm assuming that the question you mean is whether a person who was apprehended in the United States is...
No, I just asked you where you're at on Christmas.
You know, like all Jews, I was probably at a Chinese restaurant.
Great answer.
And yes, we took in Chinese food yesterday. There was a story for why there's a tradition you may not know around why Jewish people in America tended to so often frequent Chinese restaurants. And it has to do with the fact that mostly it's perceived to be more or less kosher. I mean, if you avoid the pork and the, the shrimp and so on, in that Chinese restaurants don't use dairy. And one of the injunctions in the Old Testament, in the Torah, is around being kosher. It's not to have milk with meat. It's a little more specific than that. So that is part of the story. And also, the reason why, though, on Christmas is that Chinese restaurants were some of the only restaurants open on Christmas. And if we didn't want to cook and make a big Christmas feast because we maybe didn't do that, that was what we would do to celebrate, go to a Chinese restaurant. Okay. Now, let me say this. Back to Donald Trump. He is going to be in office in a few weeks. And I think before the election, I was a little scared that being someone who's loud about him, who, when I was over on Twitter, would get some trolls who I believe he was somewhat involved when I was targeted by what I consider to be one of his lackeys. And I don't know if you know that whole story, but Jacob Wall and I mean, there's a whole thing. I think here, I'll give you a link in the chat. I think this Vermont Public Radio version is good. Ari Melber, that Jacob Wall, that internet troll who was also convicted for a number of things. You can look him up. It's JACOB, had targeted me sometime in the fall of, I believe it was 2018. And tried to get me. It was stupidly wrapped up into some false accusation against Robert Mueller. It's a long story. You can read about it later. And I do believe it was somehow connected to how much I was attacking Donald Trump on Twitter, although I'll never be able to fully prove that for sure. But at any rate, I do worry sometimes that if I continue with what I'm doing here, that I could be subject to attack in some way, what legal and specifically. And then it dawned on me that there is a huge, long list, well ahead of me that he's got to get through. But nevertheless, there are going to be a lot of people who are going to face legal challenges, which means money and time. And the good news is that a legal defense fund is being started. And I do see, I don't know if these are connected. I'm going to share this with you. A legal defense fund is being started to help people defray costs and pay for legal services if they are attacked by Trump or threatened with defamation lawsuits and so on. And also, and maybe separately, I saw on Blue Sky that Mark Zaid, the attorney, is looking for economists and lawyers and other people to act on a pro bono basis to sign up and help in these efforts. So let me share with you what I heard, and I think this is wonderful. This is what gives me comfort.
ABC News reporting reveals that pro-democracy advocates are building a nationwide network of resources to defend people they believe could be targeted by the president-elect. People familiar with the planning tell NBC News the network aims to provide free legal and financial help to people named as potential targets by the incoming administration.
Trump has threatened to convene military tribunals to try people he doesn't like. And he's threatened prosecutors, he's threatened judges. We think it's absolutely essential that these folks who have done nothing more than exercise their civic duty have the defense to which they're entitled. And so we're seeking help from lawyers around the country. And we've been quite successful so far in putting together a strong group that can take on this extremely important task for democracy.
So I think that's really good. I want you to know about that. And also, now before I get to Crazy Town, I want to circle back to, for one moment, to the Donald Trump MAGAfest Destiny, aka the Moron Doctrine, because you might remember there was James Monroe. I think he was the 5th president of the United States, and he coined the Monroe Doctrine, or it was named after him. And it wasn't like explicit. It was the concept of a plan and the idea there. And I think his Secretary of State was John Quincy Adams, who later turned against this idea. But with the Monroe Doctrine, the concept was that it would be the United States' job to protect the Western Hemisphere from the European colonial powers, right? And then it kind of expanded to this idea of manifest destiny over that same kind of time period into the future decades of the mid-19th century. This idea of go west, young man, the journalist Horace Greeley, this idea of moving west. It also deals with taking Texas, fights with Mexico, moving west to Oregon and California and all of that, right? That becomes manifest destiny. But for the most part, when you think of the Monroe Doctrine, you think of it as justified in a sort of defensive way. Then we get to Teddy Roosevelt at the turn of the century, where he had what was called, it's not the Roosevelt Doctrine, but I think it was called the Roosevelt Corollary, right? To build on the Monroe Doctrine. And Roosevelt said, moved it from defense to offense, right? And that's when we were going to, under that kind of doctrine is, entering into South America, Latin America, this idea of making the world safe for bananas, et cetera, right? This is that sort of conquest, imperialism. Okay. So I just want to let you know there's a history of this. And then, of course, I'm skipping over some presidencies to get to, as I mentioned, the Bush Doctrine. Before that, though, I just want to mention, because I haven't talked about the Panamanian history, that under Jimmy Carter, Panama was returned to the Panamanian. I'm sorry, let me say it differently. The Panama Canal was returned to the Panamanians. And it was done under a treaty ratified by the U.S. Senate in 1978. And it was considered to be a huge accomplishment of Jimmy Carter. And it gave essentially, Panama the control of the Panama Canal. So this is, this goes back many years, almost half a century at this point. So curious why we are reopening this, but actually not entirely curious. Donald Trump stuck his finger in a map, wants to be a tough guy, doesn't see people as human, sees territories as things he wants to grab, to make money, to be a strong man. And, who knows what Vladimir Putin has whispered in his ear. Remember, Donald has 2 daddies, Elon Musk and Vladimir Putin. Musk, who comes from a family of mineral miners, would really love to have those minerals in Greenland. And of course, Vladimir Putin, through Donald Trump, would love to expand the United States' control of North America, of the Western Hemisphere, as well into, of course, down to the Panama Canal. So that's where we are. We shall see. You may think it's outlandish, but if you look at our U.S. history, you will see this is perfectly in line with what we have done before. So let us go to Crazy Town if this wasn't crazy enough. Crazy Town is the state of billionaires in the United States. I mean, if you look at some of the numbers, people like Jeff Bezos of Amazon made so much money during the pandemic. I mean, I when I think about Bezos's wealth, and Bezos pandemic wealth, I'm going to get to the crazy town thing. His wealth, billionaire wealth in the United States, and I'm going to share this with you right now in the chat. It is, hold on, let me go into the chat. So you have, this is from the Institute for Policy Studies. So you know I'm quoting a real source. That US, and this is from March of this year, according to the Institute for Policy Studies, a legitimate think tank, US billionaire wealth is up 88% since the pandemic. US billionaire wealth now tops $5.5 trillion. Okay, so at the beginning of the pandemic, guys, Forbes, this is right before the pandemic, right? This was in, early 2020. Forbes had published its 34th annual billionaire survey. They published it March 18th. So obviously it was written before the pandemic hit and things closed down. And at that time, in 2020, there were only 614 billionaires. And together in 2020, they owned $2.947 trillion, close to $3 trillion in wealth. But by 4 years later, we had gone from 614 billionaires to 737 billionaires together have $5.5 trillion in wealth. This is an 87.6% increase. Okay. And let's look at who is on that list. I think you probably know. We have Elon Musk, who in 2020 was worth about $25 billion. In May of 2022, he'd gone up to 255 billion. Now, I mean, this article is old. Now this says 188. We know he's worth nearly half a trillion dollars now. So these articles are, this is even out of date. According to this article, Bezos went from 113 billion to 192 billion dollars. That was as of March of this year, right? So Bezos, right now, his net worth is $242 billion, according to the latest resources. That is crazy town. That is crazy town. Now, the fun part of crazy town is as follows. Here we go. This is a TikTok mocking Bezos because, as you know, he's about to get married again. And he is spending something like, am I wrong to think it's $650 million on the wedding? I mean, I think I heard that's what he was spending, $600 million on the wedding. But people are saying that he's denying it's going to cost $600 million. The fact that people believe it tells you all you need to know. But I thought this was pretty fun for Crazy Town. Here we go. A TikTok mock.
Oh, boss, did you see Mr. Bezos is having a big old wedding for $600 million in Aspen? That's sweet. I'm glad you think so. You do realize you're going to be docked for the time you spent reading and talking to me, right? Yeah, no, I know. I'm going to go pee in a bottle and get back to work.
I mean... Guys, we're going to be in Crazy Town for quite a while. And from what I know about history, I don't know if the pendulum swings back and forth or if things go in cycles or waves. You take whatever you want. But the one thing that has always endured and which is a form of resistance is this. It is sarcasm. It is joy in the face of this nonsense. And I will say it is so important. It's part of my tradition. We sometimes call it gallows humor, right? Or dark humor. But it's something I will never forget that my friend Ilana Roston, who I went to college with, she went to a different class than mine. And when she told me her professor said this phrase, we are now talking decades ago. It sticks in my mind. I've probably said it to you, and it is as follows. Irony is the discourse of the disempowered. Let's bring the snark. Let's bring it all. Let's laugh in the face of their authoritarianism, and let's make sure that we do what we can to protect each other. And part of that is laughter and mockery and not looking the other way and pretending it's not happening, because that just creates fear and isolation. Anyway, guys, remember, tomorrow's Friday, and I missed last Friday, so tomorrow's going to be the first day I bring the whiteboard. Cannot wait. See you then.